start.
Okay, so again, why do we care about breathing mechanics? Our breathing mechanics are directly tied to the degree of physical activity tolerance and exercise tolerance that we experience. And that's because our ability to be physically active and exercise is heavily influenced by our body's capacity to not only pull oxygen in to the system, but offload that oxygen to the muscles that are demanding it for energy turnover. That's a very specific style of energy turnover. It's called aerobic metabolism. We'll talk about that stuff more in the coming weeks. But if we can optimize the amount of oxygen that we pull in, as well as optimize that oxygen's availability to get offloaded to the muscles that are demanding it for a portion of energy turnover, then we're going to be able to tolerate physical activity and exercise at a much higher level of efficiency. So, in essence, what I'm talking about is if our breathing mechanics are as good as we can get them, we're going to be able to do more for longer and at a level of intensity that we want to be doing whatever that activity is. So the main way to accomplish optimizing the amount of oxygen that we pull into the system and making that oxygen as readily available as possible to the working muscles is to engage in nasal breathing. Nasal breathing is inhaling through our nose and exhaling through our nose. Diaphragmatic breathing is inhaling through our nose and exhaling through our mouth. And we're going to do both. We're going to practice both because when we're exercising, it's beneficial to breathe, to do nasal breathing for as long as we can, because that is indicative of us exercising at no higher than a moderate level of intensity. And there's unique benefits to exercising at moderate intensities, just like there are unique benefits to exercising at vigorous intensities. And there's some overlap between the two. But if we are able to engage in nasal breathing, meaning inhaling and exhaling through our nose, that's indicative of us being at a moderate intensity or a moderate level of intensity for physical activity. Once we begin to inhale through our nose and exhale through our mouth, that is indicative of us transitioning into a higher or a more vigorous intensity level. So to practice nasal breathing, I'm going to encourage everybody to close your mouth, place your tongue against the roof of your mouth, try to inhale through your nose only for 3 seconds, hold it for 3 seconds, and then exhale through your nose for 3 seconds. Let's try this together. So I'm going to inhale through my nose. I'm going to close my mouth. I'm going to place my tongue in the roof of my mouth to create a seal. I'm going to inhale through my nose for 3 seconds. I'm going to hold it for 3 seconds, and then I'll exhale through my nose for 3 seconds. Let's do that 2 more times. Inhale for 3. Hold it. Exhale for 3. Let's do it again through our nose. Inhale. Good. One of the benefits to doing that is, and one of the reasons that it indicates that we are engaging in an intensity level of activity that's not greater than moderate intensity, is that when we engage in that nasal breathing, there's a substance that's released into our bloodstream. It's called nitric oxide. Nitric oxide helps us to regulate our blood pressure because nitric oxide is one of the primary ways that we are able to influence our blood vessels to expand in diameter or to dilate. When our blood vessels dilate, our blood pressure decreases because the blood vessel becomes larger, so the pressure inside the vessel can stay at a more moderate level. When we exercise, blood pressure increases anyway for a small amount of time. But then when we stop exercising, we transition back to our homeostatic level of blood pressure. This is another reason that breathing mechanics can help us to manage anxiety and stress. And exercise is a form of stress. It's a health protective form of stress. It's different than what we would consider chronic stress, which is the type of stress that we hear about that's health detrimental or detrimental to our health. But acute stress, like exercise, is a health protective stress. Our body interprets the physical activity as stress. In return, our heart begins to beat faster and pump harder to deliver blood to our muscles and draw it away from our organs. That's just what's known as a sympathetic response. It's basically our body preparing itself to either fight or flight, fight or flight response, fight or run. But we can manage that to a degree with our breathing mechanics. So we just did some nasal breathing. Let's transition into some diaphragmatic breathing. Both of these styles of breathing are going to be health beneficial or health protective, not just in terms of exercise. In everyday life, every moment of the day, I encourage everyone to try and engage in as much nasal breathing and diaphragmatic breathing as possible. Diaphragmatic breathing, as the name indicates, helps us to fully engage the activity of our diaphragm. Our diaphragm is this kind of a dome-shaped muscle that sits between our ribs and our belly button. It sort of hangs down or drapes down on the sides. And when we inhale, our diaphragm contracts and flattens out. So in essence, when we inhale, our diaphragm flattens out and pushes forward and outward all the way around. And it flattens out so that our lungs have more room to expand. It increases the volume of our chest cavity. When we exhale, our diaphragm balloons back out or pulls inward, increases the amount of pressure in our chest cavity and helps to push more waste off, more carbon dioxide. We breathe oxygen in, we exhale carbon dioxide as waste. Carbon dioxide is a byproduct of us using oxygen in that energy turnover scenario we were talking about. So diaphragmatic breathing, the easiest way that I have found to think of it is that when we inhale through our nose, we're going to imagine the entirety of our torso expanding outward like a balloon. You can also think of this in terms of the area around your midsection getting bigger when you inhale through your nose. And then when we exhale through our mouth, we try to contract the muscles of our midsection. We try to compress that expansion that just occurred in our torso. We try to make it smaller. Another way to think about this is when we inhale through our nose, think about opening your ribs. When you exhale through your mouth, think about your ribs knitting back together. Additional way to think about it is when we inhale through our nose, our hips actually rotate externally. Our hips actually expand. And when we exhale through our mouth, our hips legitimately rotate internally. They close our pelvis back together. I would encourage everybody to focus either on the ribs, the belly, or the hips, whatever makes more sense to you. But we close our mouths, we inhale through our nose, and we expand. We exhale through our mouths, and we contract or we tighten. So let's try this 3 times with the same scenario we did the nasal breathing with. I'm going to inhale through my nose for 3 seconds, hold it for 3 seconds, and then exhale through my mouth for 3 seconds. Did anybody else lose audio? No? It'll probably come back on. Okay, here we go. Inhale through my nose, through our nose for 3 seconds and expand. Hold it. Exhale through our mouth for 3 seconds and contract. Inhale through our nose and expand. Exhale through our mouth and contract. One more time. Inhale through our nose and expand. Exhale through our mouth and contract. Excellent. I'm going to show you a couple of different ways to practice this. What I just showed you can be performed standing, seated, or laying down, flat on your back or on your side. I'm going to show you ways to engage in some additional practices for this, laying on your back and laying on your side. The benefit of doing this is that if you're experiencing any difficulty with that idea of when we inhale through our nose, our ribs expanding, our belly expanding, and our hips opening up, and then when we exhale through our mouths, our hips closing, our belly tightening, and our ribs knitting back together, then if we do that, if we do this from a couple of different positions, it might help to bring us into a better sense of what that feeling is. So I'm going to get onto the floor on my back. So this would be supine or a supine position. And we're going to practice those breathing mechanics in this way. So you can have legs straight out, you can have feet on the floor. You really just want to try to get your back into contact with whatever that surface is. I'm going to inhale through my nose for 3 seconds and try to really focus on the expansion of my ribs side to side, my belly side to side, and my hips opening side to side, and then exhale through my mouth and try to focus on the idea of my hips closing back together, my belly tightening, and my ribs knitting back together. Let's try this. Let's try this as a group. You don't have to be in this position. We're just going to try the breathing as a group. I'm going to inhale through my nose and expand everything. And I'm going to exhale through my mouth and contract everything. So hopefully you can see my stomach expanding or my belly expanding and tightening. Expanding on the inhale. Tightening on the exhale. Expanding as I inhale through my nose. Tightening as I exhale through my mouth. Good. So in this position, we've got some constraint for the forward or the front to back expansion. So one additional way we can practice this is in side lying. This will allow us to focus more on the forward and back expansion as opposed to the side to side, because the floor or the bed or the couch or whatever object you're laying in this side, you're in this sideline position on, will restrict that a little bit. So again, here we go. I'm going to inhale through my nose and expand. Exhale through my mouth and contract. Let me try to get the camera a little closer to my midsection, so maybe you can see my belly expanding and contracting a little better. Okay. You want to support your head so that your neck's in a neutral position. We're going to inhale and expand. Exhale and contract. Inhale and expand. Exhale and contract. One more time. Inhale through the nose and expand. Exhale through the mouth and contract. Excellent. So let's get into some postural exercises. Why do we care about posture? By definition, posture is the alignment that we hold different segments of our body in while we're either at rest or being mobile. One reason we want to try to optimize our posture is, number one, it's going to reduce the risk of injury that we experience because it's going to help to improve our balance and our stability. The second reason is it's going to help to alleviate some of the sense of chronic fatigue that a lot of us experience in specific muscle groups. Namely, a lot of us experience fatigue in the muscles of our neck, our shoulders, between our shoulder blades, our middle back, our lower back, and our hips. A lot of the tightness that we experience in these areas is, if not created by our postural positions, it can be exacerbated by our postural positions, meaning it can be increased. And that's because, let me get my prop. That's because the muscles of our body are, for the most part, placed on opposing sides of bones. So if we imagine this paper towel roll as a bone, one of my hands is a muscle on one side of the bone, and the other hand is a muscle on the opposing side of the bone. When the muscles on one side of a bone shorten and pull on the bone, the muscles on the other side need to be able to lengthen in response to that, but they also need to be able to reflexively tighten in order to bring that joint back into a neutral position. When we spend time in posture that is not as vertical as we could have it, we create these imbalances in muscle tension on either side of the joint, where the muscles on both sides of the joint are chronically engaged and tightened and contracted, and they're basically fighting against each other all the time, as opposed to functioning to support the bone and the joint that they're associated with. So another way to think about this is that if we spend a lot of time with a forward head tilt, that will inevitably influence a forward tilt of our shoulders That brings the center of mass of our upper body forward. We reflexively push our hips back to try to compensate for that and create a different sense of balance. Now we've got muscles in our back, our shoulders, our neck. They're constantly fighting to slow any further progression of that forward-leaning posture. So I'm going to share with you 4 checkpoints that you can put into place to help you to improve your posture and reduce some of the chronic fatigue that a lot of us experience in some of these joints I'm talking about: our shoulders, our neck, our upper back, our lower back, and our hips. We're going to go from top to bottom. So number 1 is going to be head tilt. If we can try to place our jaw as close to being level to the ground as possible, that's going to neutralize our head tilt. Some of us might feel like we have to tuck our chin to accomplish that. Some of us may feel like we're having to look or lift our head up and look down our nose a little bit to accomplish that. It just depends on what your typical position of head tilt is. But the goal is to bring your jaw and the bottom of your nose into a position as level with the ground as possible. Number 2, stacking our ears and our shoulders and our hips. Stacking our ear, the top of our ear, over the top of our shoulder by getting into that neutral head tilt position, and then pulling our shoulders down and back, almost as if we're trying to squeeze a pencil between our shoulder blades, or maybe squeeze 2 tennis balls, or 1 tennis ball in each armpit. That helps to stack our ear directly over the top of our shoulder, as well as stack the top of our shoulder directly over the top of our hip. If we can get into this kind of vertical position where we've got a neutral head tilt, our jaw is level to the ground, and we have a stacked posture where our ear is stacked over our shoulders are stacked over our hips, it'll help to prevent us from shifting our hips back and our torso forward and getting into these states of postural imbalance. To neutralize or to keep hip alignment, one way to accomplish that, one way that I find to be identifiable for myself is if I imagine everything between my ribs and the top of my thigh as a bowl full of water, I want to try to keep the water in the bowl. If I'm able to stack my posture vertically, regardless of me being seated, laying flat on my back, or standing, if I'm able to stack my ear over my shoulder, pull my shoulders down and back, and stack my shoulders over my hips, and then keep the water in that imaginary bowl, that provides me with as much of a vertical posture as I can get. It's not always going to be straight up and down. And that's not the goal. The goal isn't for you to mimic what you see. The goal is for you to optimize your posture as much as possible. So we've got head tilt, trying to get the jaw and the bottom of our nose level with the ground. We've got the stacking of our ear over our shoulders over our hips. The fourth component is pretending that your heels are screwdrivers. and really trying to focus on the idea of tightening your heels into the surface that they are in contact with. That doesn't mean pull your toes up. It's really indicating more trying to avoid getting into states where either your weight is shifted forward into your toes and the ball of your foot, and instead keeping your weight distributed down through your heels and the ball of your feet and your toes. So, oh, did I just lose my video? I think I just froze. Let's see if it comes back. And it's back. Okay. So that's breathing mechanics and some vertical posture. Let's put those into practice while we do some active stretching or some dynamic stretching. I'm going to do these stretches in a seated position. Most of them can be done in a seated position and or a position of laying on your back. What I'm going to do is take us through from head to toe a series of dynamic stretches, meaning we're going to be moving while we stretch, but a series of dynamic stretches that target the joints where most of us feel a good bit or an accelerated amount, an increased amount of muscle tension and tightness. I'm going to start at the neck. Let me bring this in so you can get a better view of what I'm doing. While I do this, I'm going to try and engage in that nasal breathing that we talked about. Meaning, I'm going to try to breathe in through my nose and out through my nose. When I breathe in, I'm going to try to think about letting my midsection or my belly, my ribs expand and open up. When I exhale through my nose, I'm going to try to think about my ribs closing and knitting together and my belly tightening. I'm going to try to maintain those postural checkpoints that at least the ones I can while my head is moving, meaning I'm going to try to keep my shoulders down away from my ears and pulled back so that they are stacked directly over the top of my hips. And I'm going to try to imagine that my heels are screwed into the ground or into whatever surface they might be in contact with. So we're going to start with 4 head rolls. I'll bring my chin forward as close to my chest as I can. I'll take my right ear toward my right shoulder. I'll rotate my head back as if I'm trying to push my chin toward the ceiling. I'll take my left ear to my left shoulder or toward my left shoulder. And then forward into this chin to chest position. And then I'll reverse that circle. And we're going to do this 4 times, 3 more times, but let's engage in nasal breathing. Inhale through the nose and expand. Exhale through the nose and contract your belly. One more. Inhaling through the nose. Exhaling through the nose. Okay. If you hear some popping, some creaking, that's okay. As long as it doesn't hurt, it's nothing to worry about. I'm going to move to the shoulders now. I'm going to engage in some shoulder rolls. Let me expand this a little bit. Change the camera. I'm going to do this with my arms at my sides. I'll start with my palms facing back. I'm going to inhale through my nose, try to raise my shoulders as high as I can, and then exhale through my nose, pull my shoulders down and back, and try to turn my palms up. Let's do it again. Palms down, inhale through the nose, shoulders up high, exhale through the nose, shoulders pulling down and back, and palms up. One more time. Inhale, exhale. At the end of this exhale, I'm going to try to extend my arms as straight out away from myself as possible, turn my palms up as much as possible. I'm going to try to make a fist in each hand, and I'm going to try to roll as large of a circle as possible in each wrist 10 times, going in one direction, and then 10 times in the opposite direction. All the while trying to keep that nasal breathing in place, as well as my stacked posture. My ears stacked above my shoulder stacked above my hip, my heels screwed into the surface that they're in contact with. I'm going to do that again. This time I'll raise my arms with palms facing down. So inhale, shoulders up, exhale, shoulders down, palms facing down. I'll raise my arms up and away from my body as much as I can. Make the fist, roll my wrists in as large of a circle as I can in one direction, still with the stacked posture, shoulders pulled down away from the ears, ear over the shoulder, shoulder over the hip. I'll change direction of the wrist roll for 10. And we'll relax. Let's move to our hips. This will actually involve our hip and our lower back. Those muscles are incredibly intertwined, and they influence each other in really, really significant ways. I'll start this by slowly trying to bring my right ankle to rest on top of my left knee. I'll allow my right arm to extend and lay on top of the inside of that right knee. Still trying to stay in a vertical posture. I want the weight of my arm to push on that knee just a little bit to try to open my hip, and this can also help to open my lower back. I'll take 2 of those nasal breaths. Thinking about expanding on the inhale through the nose, contracting on the exhale through the nose. And as I exhale, I'll start trying to roll as large of a circle with my right ankle as I can in one direction for 10 repetitions, and then I'll try to go in the opposite direction for 10 repetitions. Still doing the nasal breathing. There, I'll try to just guide that right leg to slide across the left so that it's hanging down across the left knee. From here, I'm going to try to inhale When I exhale, I'm going to try to raise my left arm up as high as I can, and then bring it down across my body so that my left arm is now across that right thigh. I'll hold the chair for some stability behind my body, and I'm going to try to rotate my chest and my torso so that I can look backward over my right shoulder as much as possible and take 2 nasal breaths. Relax. Try to untangle that. Same thing on the other side. I'm going to slowly try to bring my left ankle over to rest on top of my right knee. I'll allow my left arm to rest on top of that left knee. Just a little bit of pressure to open the hip up. I'm going to breathe in and out through my nose, and I'm going to try to rotate my ankle 10 times in each direction. When I'm done with that, I'll try to guide that leg across and down over the right leg. I'll stack my posture. I'll inhale. On the exhale, I'm going to try to bring that right arm up as straight overhead as possible, down across my body, across that left leg. Hold the chair behind me and try to rotate my torso so that I'm looking over my left shoulder, breathing in and out twice. And then we'll unwind that.